Hello and welcome to More to the Story with Molly White. I am so glad you joined us again today, and we have another wonderful guest on today, and you don't want to miss this show. So I encourage you to invite all of your friends, everyone you know, to tune in to our show today because this is going to be a very powerful testimony. And before we get started, and before I introduce my special guest, I just want to give a shout out to our show sponsor, Dr. Steve Hotze with the Hotze Health and Wellness Center. I have been his patient. I guess he doesn't like to call us patients, but are his guest for many years now. And he works very hard to keep me healthy. And believe me, I really appreciate it because I haven't been sick in a long time. But so I encourage you to visit his website and check that out. And I want to invite you to be a sponsor of the show or to be a donor to the show and to partner with us because our message of exposing the lies of the abortion industry, talking about how abortion hurts women, men, and families, and also offering the hope and healing that God has for the wounded and to protect those mommies and their babies from abortion is what we do. And we want to continue doing this, and we want to reach far and wide because we know there's hurting people and uninformed people all over the world that need to hear our message. So I just want to encourage you to do that. And if you have any comments or suggestions or any feedback, man, we would love to hear from you. And you can contact us via our, post a message there on our YouTube or Facebook or wherever you listen and watch, or send us an email. Now I'd like to introduce to you my awesome, wonderful co-host, Mary Browning.
Thank you, Molly. It's so good to be with you today. And we do, as always, we want to do a trigger warning for those joining us. If you are participating or enjoying the show and you feel your emotions reacting to something you might hear, then I would say that is an invitation to us to another level of healing. And we would invite you to contact the H3 helpline at 866-721-7881. We will have a testimony today from someone that has experienced abortion. And so you may find yourself reacting to that. And we would sure hope you would get some hope and healing through the H3 helpline. Thank you, Molly.
Thank you, Mary. And our guest today, Mary, we have not had a guest on that has a story like this before. And it's really, it's going to be new for, I think, all of our listeners and our viewers, but not new to those out there who might have had the same experience. And we're going to talk about judicial bypass abortion. That means a young woman can go to a judge who's already been screened by the abortion industry and get a rubber stamp approval to have an abortion without parental consent or knowledge. And so that's who our special guest is today. She is also a podcast host. She's a public speaker. She talks about her experience, and she's from the wonderful state of North Dakota. So I want to introduce Brittany Poppe as our special guest today.
Hi, Mary and Molly. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Brittany. Thank you for coming on. And we're real excited, and not excited, but we're very intrigued to hear your testimony about judicial bypass abortion because like I said, we have not had a guest on who's had that experience. So kind of introduce yourself and then take us back to that time.
Yeah. So as Molly said, my name is Brittany and I live in North Dakota. I am married. My husband and I have 2 small children. They keep us very busy. And in addition to just being able to raise them at home, I help minister to other women who have had abortions because that is a part of my story. I was 17 years old when I found myself in an unplanned pregnancy. And I had been kind of living this double life at this point. I had been in this relationship with a boy that my mom had kind of forbidden me from being with. And instead of doing the right thing and obeying, honoring my mom, I chose to continue that relationship in secret. And so a year and a half later, I found myself in this unplanned pregnancy and kind of at a crossroads of what do I do now? Because I can't continue keeping this secret if I stay pregnant. I can hide my pregnancy to a point, but I certainly cannot hide my child. And so even though I had been raised in a Christian home, a home that valued all life, that believed that life was created by God, every single unique human being has value, I completely went against all of those beliefs and I chose to have an abortion, even in my state of North Dakota, which has a pretty pro-life reputation by going through that judicial
So, how did you
bypass.
find out that was even a possibility, Brittany?
Yeah, so I am a millennial. So I am the generation that's kind of, knows what life was like before we had the smartphones with the touch screens, but those were kind of becoming a thing at this time. And so I had, one of the first models of touch screen cell phones. And so I had access to the internet in my bedroom. And the first thing I did was Google, can I legally have an abortion under the age of 18? And what I found was that I absolutely could, even in my state of North Dakota. At the time, we had one freestanding abortion clinic. And it was in the same city that I was living in. And the Google search took me directly to their website where it talked about this thing called judicial bypass. And basically, it said that I would have to meet before a judge and get a signature of approval, and then I could have this abortion. And that sounded really intimidating to me because I didn't know how I would go about contacting a judge and asking them for this signature and all of these things. And so I called the abortion facility and they told me that it was extremely easy to do. I didn't have to do any of the legwork for that. And they would even drive me there themselves. I didn't have to lift one single finger in order to get this done.
Wow. They had it all.
Brittany, you don't know this about me, but I'm an attorney, and I was just, waiting to see what you're going to say, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, wow, they just,
So
that's
you didn't.
interesting.
So you didn't have anyone really to um, tell you about the whole process. The pros and cons of abortion, or you know, um, what this was going to be. But you had the convenience of someone picking you up, taking you. And let me tell you,
Mhm.
the abortion industry picks out these judges. They all
Mhm.
the
Oh,
lawyers
I
and they have
know.
the judges who will just rubber stamp an abortion without even knowing anything about the young woman's mental health, her home life,
Mhm.
or her even physical health. They just rubber stamp approval.
Yep, it's so interesting you say that. It's so true because I remember the woman who drove me there that day looked at the name of the judge that I would be seeing and she said, "Oh, I'm so glad we got him. We always try to get him because he always says yes. He never says no. And this other guy, he kind of gives us some issues. He likes to ask too many
Wow.
questions." um,
Yeah.
yeah, so it is very,
Wow.
very true.
And so after you
Yeah.
got the approval, I mean, I don't know, did you have to say anything to the judge? Did you have a counselor there with you to do your talking, or, how did that go?
Yeah, so the woman who drove me over to the courthouse, she went in there with me. And I remember he asked me just a couple of questions. He just asked me, why did I want to have this abortion? Why did I think that I was able to make this decision for myself before I was legally an adult? What outside factors was I concerned about? And it was really very a short meeting. And he just kind of nodded when I would answer those questions. And then he said, well, I don't see any reason not to sign this. And so he signed it off. And then I remember I had worn my high school letterman's jacket. And so I remember as we were getting up to leave, he asked me, he kind of took an interest in my jacket, and he asked me what I had done to earn it. You know, what activities was I in that I lettered in? And I mentioned that I was a musician. I played violin on my high school orchestra team. And he kind of smiled and paused and just kind of nodded and said, that's really amazing. I hope that you never stop doing that. And sometimes I can't help but wonder if he knew that I would lose joy for the things in my life that I had once loved because of the immense grief that I experienced afterwards.
I don't know if he did or not, because how can the conscience of someone who knows that kind of impact would continue to allow young women to do that? And so after you got the approval, they got the permission, what happened next?
So the woman that drove me there, she drove me back, and she kind of was with me pretty much the whole time. So a majority of the other women, I didn't notice that they had a person that was literally almost kind of babysitting them. They were alone. All of our support persons, we were allowed to bring someone in the building, but they couldn't be in the waiting room with us. They had their own separate waiting room at this facility. But this woman was with me pretty much like right next to my side the whole time. And she, you know, would just kind of say certain things that I would go through next. And I just kind of remember being in this waiting room and this like eerie feeling, knowing that we were all there for the same reason, but none of us would make eye contact or look at each other. It was just really kind of almost like an out-of-body experience during this time.
And did you get any information at the abortion clinic? Did they counsel with you? Did they give you information on fetal development, on alternatives, any kind of support?
No, well, I did not hear anything about fetal development. I wasn't given any other options. I do remember the woman that I've been talking about. She did sit me down and kind of just tell me what the procedure was like in very it was definitely not informed consent, because I still was not prepared for what I went through. But she did say, now there's this little box here. She showed me a piece of paper and she said, there's this little box here. There's a couple of risks with this procedure, but this is way safer than if you were to have this baby. And I'm only required to go over this box with you by law. I've never seen any of this happen, which I know is not true. But she said, I've never seen any of this happen. I'm just required by law to tell you this. So here you go. Just look at it for yourself. And then she kind of moved on to something else. So in my mind, that's not really informed consent. But that was about the extent of any sort of counseling, if you can even call it that I received.
That's very common. Very common. Mary, do you have anything?
No.
Yeah. And so you had the abortion. Do you remember that experience and what that was like?
Yeah, so I remember kind of walking back to the room, and at this point, you know, as I said, I was raised with morals and values, and I remembered them as I was walking back to this room. But I had gotten so far into this process that I just kind of hardened my heart and said, I've made it this far. I've just got to do this, and then I never will have to think about it again. And so I remember, you know, I had a surgical abortion. So they got me ready to do the procedure at this facility. And I think this is common, or probably most common. I was given no pain management. And I just remember not being prepared for how painful it would be. I was told that I could take some ibuprofen the morning before I came in, but that most women tolerate it very well. And I was say from my experience that I would never tell someone that
Oh,
after what I
and
experienced.
ibuprofen would
It
not
was the
yeah,
most
ibuprofen would not have touched it.
no,
Mm-mm,
it
mm,
didn't
no.
touch it. No. It was the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life, and I have had
Oh.
2 children. So, that I would that I would not wish that pain on anyone. In fact, I was in so much pain that the doctor could kind of tell, and the doctor who performed my abortion was a woman, and I remember she kind of stopped for a minute and she just looked up at me, and she wasn't mean about this, but she was kind of like, if you're in a lot of pain, one thing I tell my patients is just to kind of wiggle their toes really fast and just think about the movement that you're doing with your toes, and it's going to act as a natural pain reliever, and it's going to be so much better for you. And so I just remember the rest of the time just like furiously wiggling my toes and just not knowing when this was going to end or how I could get this to end.
Toes would be a natural pain reliever? I have never heard
That's
I've
what she said to
anything
me.
never,
like
ever
that.
heard yeah,
It doesn't work.
never. And to me, it's so brutal
No.
and so cruel to put a woman through that experience without
Mhm.
any anesthesia. I had the same experience, and it's torture. It is
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
is
It is.
below medical practice. I mean, you don't put your patients through that kind of pain, you know, and then tell them
Mhm.
to wiggle their toes. I'm sorry, that just kinda took my breath away when you said that.
Mine as well.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and then take a
Mhm.
ibuprofen, and they just like they're saying, well, taking the abortion drug is like taking, an aspirin. Well, that's a lie, you
Mhm.
know, and so
Yeah.
I'm sure you left the clinic there alone, traumatized, bleeding, and this lady took you home?
No, so I did get a ride to the facility from my boyfriend at the time. He was not in support of me having an abortion. He wanted us to have the child and raise the child together. He wanted us to get married. And I just was very adamant that that was just not an option that I would consider. And so he waited at the facility in the separate waiting room for me. And then he took me out to lunch and then drove me to my friend's house. I had arranged to stay with my friend instead of go back home because I was just so terrified that my mom was going to be able to tell that something was wrong or that I had done something. And so he was the one who left the
Mm.
facility with me.
And what was his response like afterwards? Mhm.
He was very good with me for a while. We did stay together for a little over a year after the abortion, but I could tell pretty soon after that his feelings for me had definitely changed. And I can't even say I blame him for that because that was his child too. And he lost somebody that day too, somebody very important to him. And I'm sure even to this day, he probably experiences grief surrounding that event in our
Well, I pray
relationship.
that the Lord would give him an opportunity or you an opportunity to find out about abortion recovery. We just had a couple on our show prior to
Mhm.
you that had an abortion together during college, and they ended up getting married, and how it was a very difficult marriage until God came in and took them through abortion recovery, and that started to revive their marriage. And it's real important for the men to heal as well. And
Yes.
so I pray that
Yes.
God will either use you or someone that would open that door of healing for him as well. And so your parents didn't find
Mhm.
out, and then how long? And well, let's just talk a little bit about how it impacted you. We know how it impacted your relationship. That obviously dissolved, and then I think you said in your testimony that it was like 10 years that you just self-destructed. Before,
Mhm.
God reached out to you.
Yeah, so I had always been a really good student, a really good kid, and I really loved music. And my grades fell so much, and I was a senior in high school at this time. So, my grades got so bad that I actually missed graduating with
Mm.
honors that year. And I quit music, and I lost pretty much most of the friends that I had and kind of got in with the wrong crowd. Thankfully, I still was able to go off to college, and I met, some decent friends there. But even still, I wasn't who I had been raised to be. I kind of lost my sense of femininity a little bit, and just really, had really no self-worth or value of who I was as a person. And I certainly was not walking in my faith and making decisions that would be God honoring at that point, for quite some time.
And then God.
Yes. And then
God.
God.
So real quick, just what were some of the self-destructive behaviors? Because there's so many of them. I know disrespecting yourself and feeling like you're not worthy of happiness or good relationships. It hurts our self-esteem, our self-worth, our self-value, and so we can make poor decisions from that. But also, we can have other issues like anger issues, trust issues, substance abuse. I mean, did that impact you in any way?
Yes, I had a lot of anger issues, and I even went so far as to go to counseling for these anger issues. And I never connected them to my abortion, but I wasn't an angry person before my abortion. And so I now can see how that unhealed shame and guilt was contributing to all of this anger that I was experiencing. And I never told my therapist at the time either
Mm,
about my abortion. So she was able to help me with some of that anger, but it wasn't complete. We didn't get to the
mm,
root of the problem. And so I was still kind of a lost
mm,
soul for a while. And I would still kind of struggle with some other things, like even some promiscuity. I didn't really drink when I was not of legal age, but once I turned legal age, I definitely drank in excess. And I do think a lot of that kind of was to um, just I felt more
mm,
confident when I was able to have a
mhm,
few drinks and talk to people because my self-worth had just gotten so poor. And so I definitely abused some of those substances for a few years in that time. And, I kind of would also almost sabotage relationships with people. Like I would get close with a girlfriend and have a really good friendship and would just kind of just sabotage it in some way. And I look back and just wonder, why did I think that I should do things like that? Why didn't I want to? It's almost like I didn't want these people to get too close to me and find out the secret that I was
yeah,
holding.
self-protective mode. Yeah.
It
Sorry.
seems like
Mhm.
self-protective, maybe.
Yeah.
Keeping the secret. It was the secret protective mode. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Hmm.
let's talk about then God. Then God. About 10 years later, tell us what happened.
Yeah, so my husband and I had gotten married. My husband is not the father of my aborted child. He and I had met in college. And I had told him about my abortion before we got married. I honestly thought it would be a deal breaker for him. And it wasn't. He was very kind and compassionate towards me, but we didn't really talk about it again after I had told him. And so we went on to have our first child together really quickly after we got married. And I had a pretty traumatic birth with her. I had to have an emergency C section, and then I experienced some postpartum
Mm,
hemorrhaging. And I just remember that kind of put me into this deep depression because I thought that I was supposed to die during
mm,
that time. And because I didn't, my punishment had not been carried out, and I didn't deserve to be here. And so, I walked that path for many months, and I'm not even really entirely 100% sure how I got out of that, like, kind of dark hole, except for the fact that I know that I had people in my life praying for me. They knew something was wrong, and didn't know exactly what it was, but they were praying for me. And, after this point, I had really kind of started focusing on trying to, get myself healthy, and not just physically, but also mentally. And I took up running, and I found that when I was running, I just felt really good. I felt physically really well. And so one day I was out on a run, and I was listening to worship music because I had come back to my faith at this point. And a worship song came through my earbuds, and it was called One Step Away by Casting Crowns. And the opening lyrics, I won't sing them because I'm not very good at singing, but essentially they go, what if you could go back and relive one day of your life all over again and unmake the mistake that left you a million miles away from the you once knew? And I just felt like, even as I tell it, I just felt the presence of God so clearly in that moment. Like, he was right there on the sidewalk running with me, and it just broke me. And I just stopped and started crying. And I'm sure my neighbors were like, what is going on with this woman on this run right now, and alone on the sidewalk crying? But he really just met me there. And what followed were many months of him just prompting and prodding me to address this root of all of these problems I had had in my life, which was my abortion. And so he led me to take a Forgiven and Set Free Bible study. And in that Bible study, I finally was able to understand the immense gift that Jesus' sacrifice is for us, and that it was for me too. And it was okay for me to accept it, and to just, accept the forgiveness that God had given me long ago when I'd asked him. And it was just the way that he met me in a place. You think you have to meet him at church, but he can literally meet you anywhere. And I'm just so thankful that he did, and that he continuously pursued me and did not give up on me.
Amen. And he is a pursuer, isn't he, Mary? He's going to
He
pursue us.
really is.
Mhm.
He
And
is.
even if we don't feel like we're worthy of him pursuing us, he does not give up on us. His love is everlasting. His love is forever, even for us women who've had an abortion in our past. His mercy endures forever, and he wants us to be healed. He wants us to be set free from the trauma and the pain, the regret of that. And he wants to restore us. I mean, we're not the same person we were before our abortion, but we are better than the person we were before our abortion, when we go through abortion recovery and we allow God to mold us into the creature that he created us to be. Do you have that same experience, that same feeling, the both of you? That's how I feel.
Yes.
Mhm. I feel I'm better
Yes,
than I was
absolutely.
before the abortion, and definitely after the abortion. So, Brittany, you're young, and Mary, I know you have a question for her. We only have a couple of minutes left, and I would love for you to ask her that question we had talked about earlier.
Brittany, I just wonder what you would have to say to those that are joining us that may find themselves in the situation that you were in, young, wondering what to do, what the future looks like, what to do with the pregnancy, the unexpected pregnancy, and then what would you have to say to them today?
Absolutely. I was so terrified of the consequences that I would face from my mom if she were to find out that I was pregnant. And I would absolutely, in a heartbeat, go back to that moment, because the consequences that you have to live with, knowing that you are the one who decided to end your child's life, are far worse than the consequences that you could experience from your parents being a little disappointed in a choice that you made. Because I know that our parents' love for us is typically in kind of mirror of God's love for us. God loves us as a parent. Our parents may be disappointed for a moment, but that love and the gift of that child will far surpass any amount of joy that you think you may have because that you choose to have an abortion. I would just really encourage you to choose life and understand that it is the most beautiful thing that you
That's
can do.
beautiful, Brittany. And I'm sure we're out of time, but I'm sure that your relationship with your husband's improved, the relationship with your children has improved. But we want to give you an opportunity to plug your podcast, what prompted you to begin it, and what you're hoping, your listeners would gain from it. Mhm.
Yeah. So after I went through that study and found my own healing, God really just kind of continued to nudge me that I needed to share my story and help others. And He kind of had placed this dream of starting a podcast in my mind years and years ago. And so that kind of came about again. And I listened to Him and I started my podcast called Does God Forgive Abortion? I originally thought my podcast would be about addressing sin in general. And He just said, nope, you've got to talk about the abortion. I have women that need this message and they need to hear it. And so my prayer for the podcast is that it just reaches women who are really struggling with that shame and that guilt and don't understand that Jesus' sacrifice really truly was for them too, that abortion is not the unforgivable sin, and that they can also be washed clean by the blood of the Lamb, fully redeemed, fully forgiven, and that they can walk in freedom
Amen.
again.
Thank you so much. And we look forward to listening to it. And Mary and I look forward to being a guest on your podcast.
Yes, I would
Oh, we'd
love that
love
so
to.
much.
And so if you're out there and you need help, we have the H3 helpline available. You can go to operationoutcry.org for more information. You can contact Brittany, which will have her information on the bottom of our screen. And we just want to invite all of you, if you've had an abortion, you've not healed from it yet, even if you don't think you've been wounded by it, we invite you to your healing and your restoration experience, because it's a hard journey, but it's a beautiful journey. So we hope you do that. And thank y'all for listening in. Brittany, thank you for joining us. Mary, always so blessed to have you as my co-host. And thank y'all for tuning in to More to the Story with Molly White. See you next time. Bye-bye.
And Molly, can we just let people know they can find Brittany? Brittany,
Yeah.
Brittany, Poppe, Brittany Poppe, www.brittanypoppe.com. Thank you.